Britain has always done community rather well. The corner shop where they know your name, the post office queue where gossip flows freely, the local pub where your glass is filled before you ask, generations knowing generations, neighbours who notice when the curtains stay closed. But some towns stopped appearing in those stories. Scattered across these islands are places where the last shop closed years ago, communities where the bus service is a memory, streets where you might walk for an hour and meet no one, towns where the silence has weight and the phone never rings. I have gone through government loneliness data, council reports, and community forums to bring you 10 towns where isolation has become the norm and loneliness is not a feeling, but a condition. Now, before we dive in, if you find this helpful, tap that subscribe button. You will not want to miss what is coming next. Let us begin on the Essex coast, in a place that has become shorthand for deprivation. Jaywick Sands sits just west of Clacton-on-Sea. It was built in the 1930s as a holiday resort. Chalets and bungalows were arranged along unmade roads designed for summer visitors escaping London. The beaches are still there, and the sea air still carries that particular coastal sharpness. But Jaywick is no longer a holiday destination. It is home to around 5,000 permanent residents, and it has been ranked the most deprived neighbourhood in England multiple times. The Index of Multiple Deprivation measures poverty across several factors: income, employment, health, education, and housing quality. Jaywick scores poorly on nearly all of them. But what the index does not capture is the texture of isolation. The nearest general practice surgery requires a bus journey that runs infrequently. The nearest hospital is in Colchester, over an hour away by public transport when the buses align. The seafront shops that once served summer crowds have largely closed. What remains is a community of people who feel forgotten. On local forums, residents describe a particular frustration. Jaywick receives media attention. Documentary crews arrive. Journalists photograph the potholed roads and the chalets with peeling paint. Then they leave. The attention never translates into sustained investment. One resident wrote that they feel like a zoo exhibit. People come to look at poverty, then drive back to places where the roads are maintained. The loneliness here is compounded by visibility. Being seen but not helped is its own form of isolation. Travelling north along the coast, we reach Withdrawal in the East Riding of Yorkshire. This is Holderness, one of the fastest eroding coastlines in Europe. The cliffs here lose roughly 2 meters to the North Sea every year. Some years, more. The land that holds the town is literally disappearing. Withdrawal was once a modest Victorian resort. The pier was destroyed by storms over a century ago and was never rebuilt. The lighthouse stands in the centre of town, no longer operational, and is now a museum. The population has declined steadily. Young people leave for Hull or Leeds or further afield. Those who remain are predominantly older. The average age creeps upward each year. The particular loneliness of Withdrawal is the loneliness of people who cannot leave. Property values in erosion zones have collapsed. Homes that families saved for decades to purchase are now worth a fraction of their mortgage debt. Selling is nearly impossible. Who buys a house that might not exist in 30 years? So residents stay, watching the coastline retreat, knowing their community shrinks with each storm. Local news has documented families trapped in this way. Unable to sell, unable to afford to simply walk away, they are bound to a town that the sea is slowly claiming. Turning inland and west, we come to Blaen o Festiniog in Gwynedd, North Wales. This is slate country. The mountains surrounding the town were quarried for over a century, producing roofing material that covered buildings across the British Empire. The terraced houses climb steep hillsides, built for workers who no longer exist. The quarries closed decades ago. The population has fallen from its peak of nearly 12,000 to under 5,000 today. Blaenau is one of the wettest places in Britain. Rain falls on average 200 days per year. The grey slate tips and the grey skies merge into a landscape that can feel oppressive even to those who love it. The town sits in a bowl between mountains, which means winter days are short and shadows long. The loneliness here is the loneliness of post-industrial Wales. Young Welsh speakers leave for Bangor or Cardiff or across the border for work. The language survives, spoken by those who remain, but the community that sustained it has thinned. Services have retreated to larger centres. The nearest district hospital is over 20 miles away in Bangor. Public transport connections are limited. A resident without a car is effectively stranded. Community forums in Welsh discuss this with a mixture of pride and grief. Pride in the landscape, in the history, in the language. Grief at what has been lost and continues to be lost. The loneliness is not just personal, but cultural. A way of life eroding as surely as the Holderness Cliffs. Moving to County Durham, we find Shildon. This is a town with a claim that should guarantee its place in national memory. The Stockton and Darlington Railway, the first public railway to use steam locomotives, was built here in 1825. Locomotion number 1 was constructed in Shildon. The town helped create the modern world. That history now sits in a museum. The railway works that once employed thousands closed in 1984. The population has declined and aged. The town centre has that familiar pattern of charity shops and empty units. The index of multiple deprivation places Shildon among the most deprived communities in England. What strikes visitors is the gap between historical significance and present reality. This town changed Britain. It connected cities, moved goods, transformed how people lived. Now it struggles to maintain a bus service. The nearest railway station is in Newton Aycliffe, 2 miles away. The symbolism is almost too neat. A town that gave Britain its railways, now poorly served by public transport. Older residents remember the works. They remember when the factory hooter marked the day, when the streets filled with workers at shift change, when everyone knew everyone because they worked together. That social fabric tore when the works closed and has never been rewoven. The loneliness is not just about being alone. It is about remembering togetherness and having to live without it. On the Lincolnshire coast, Skegness presents a different pattern. In summer, the population swells. Families arrive for the beach, the amusement arcades, the donkey rides. The Jolly Fisherman poster promises that Skegness is so bracing. For 3 months, the town buzzes with life. Then September comes. The arcades close their shutters. The guest house is empty. The seasonal workers leave. What remains is a year-round population of around 20,000, and it is heavily weighted toward retirees. East Lindsey, the district containing Skegness, has some of the highest social isolation rates in England. The winter months are long. The seafront that sparkled with lights falls dark. The chip shops that queued down the street serve a handful of regulars. Residents describe an eerie quality to off-season Skegness. All the infrastructure of entertainment sits idle, waiting for visitors who will not return for months. One resident compared it to living in a theatre after the audience has gone home. The props are still there, the lights are off. You wander the empty stage alone. The loneliness of seasonal towns is structural. Everything is built for people who are not there. The permanent residents live among ghosts of summer, surrounded by reminders of livelier times. At the end of a peninsula in Cumbria, Barrow-in-Furness might be the most isolated town of its size in England. It has a population of around 70,000, yet reaching any other major settlement requires a journey that feels disproportionate. The Lake District lies between Barrow and the rest of the country. Beautiful, yes? Also an effective barrier. Barrow exists because of shipbuilding. The dockyards have produced vessels since the 1870s and still build submarines today. The town is not dying in the way of former mining villages. Employment exists, but the isolation is geographical and psychological. Residents speak of feeling cut off from the rest of England. National retail chains bypass Barrow. Cultural events tour elsewhere. The single road in and out floods during bad weather. The loneliness here is the feeling of being overlooked. Barrow is large enough that it should matter, but remote enough that it often does not. Regional planning seems to forget it exists. When national conversations discuss northern towns, Barrow rarely features. It sits at the end of the line, literally and metaphorically. Scattered across Lincolnshire are villages where isolation has become acute. Places like Coningsby and Tattershall, like Horncastle and Spilsby. Individually, each has its character. Collectively, they represent a pattern of rural service withdrawal that has left older residents stranded. The mobile library that once visited monthly was the bus that connected villages to market towns was reduced to twice weekly, then cancelled entirely. The district nurse who knew everyone retired and was not replaced. The post office that sold stamps and cashed pensions closed. Each loss was small. Together they accumulated into something devastating. Age UK. Lincolnshire has documented the consequences. Older people who have not spoken to another person in weeks. Pensioners who must choose between heating and the taxi fare to a medical appointment. Former farmers who spent their lives in active communities now sitting in farmhouses at the end of lanes, waiting for a visit that may not come. Parish council minutes from these villages read like chronicles of decline. Another service cut. Another facility closed. Another request for support denied. The loneliness is administrative as much as personal. These communities have been weighed and found not worth the investment. Now we come to places where loneliness is not an accident of geography or economics, but a consequence of deliberate choices. Grimethorpe in South Yorkshire was a mining village. The pit employed over 2,000 men at its peak. The colliery band, immortalized in the film Brassed Off, became famous precisely because the closure of the mine threatened to destroy the community that sustained it. The mine closed in 1993. 30 years later, Grimethorpe remains among the most deprived areas in England. Life expectancy here is years below the national average. Employment rates have never recovered. The regeneration funds that arrived never quite regenerated. New buildings went up. Community spirit proved harder to reconstruct. The loneliness of Grimethorpe is generational. Men who lost their purpose when the pit closed. Sons who grew up in communities built around work that no longer existed. Grandsons who never knew what their grandfathers lost, only that something vital had been taken. The social bonds of mining life, the working men's clubs, the union meetings, the shared identity of underground work, none of it survived the closure. Residents speak of before and after. Before, everyone knew their neighbours because they worked with them. After, people retreated behind closed doors. The communal life that made hardship bearable disappeared alongside the wages. In the South Wales valleys, Ebbw tells a parallel story. The steelworks closed in 2002, ending over a century of production. European Union structural funds poured in. A hospital was built, then downgraded. A railway station was opened, connecting the valley to Cardiff. Office buildings rose on the site of the former works. But community did not return with the buildings. The young people who left for university or work elsewhere did not come back. The population continued to age. The town centre still struggles with empty shopfronts. The loneliness persists despite the investment, or perhaps because of its nature. Physical infrastructure was rebuilt. Social infrastructure was not. The Welsh government's own assessments acknowledge the gaps. Money can construct buildings. It cannot reconstruct the relationships that formed when everyone worked the same shifts at the same plant, drank at the same clubs, supported the same rugby team. Ebbw Vale has facilities now. What it lacks is the density of connection that once made it a community. Finally, we must speak of Blackpool. Not the Blackpool of the Tower and the illuminations, the hen parties and the stag doos. The other Blackpool. The residential wards away from the Golden Mile, places with names like Bloomfield and Claremont and Brunswick. These are among the most deprived neighbourhoods in England. The statistics are difficult to absorb. Life expectancy in parts of Blackpool is a decade shorter than the national average. Multiple wards rank in the worst 1% nationally for deprivation. The concentration of houses in multiple occupation has created a transient population, people who arrive in crisis, stay briefly, and move on. Stable community becomes impossible when your neighbours change every few months. The loneliness of Blackpool is the loneliness of crowds. The town is not empty. People live here in significant numbers, but they do not know each other. They do not stay long enough to build relationships. The bedsits and converted guest houses designed for holiday visitors now house permanent residents who live alongside strangers. Social prescribing referrals in Blackpool, where doctors refer patients to community activities rather than medications for loneliness, are among the highest in the country. The NHS recognizes isolation here as a health crisis. The treatment is connection. The problem is that connection requires continuity, and continuity requires people to stay. I have walked you through 10 places where loneliness is not a personal failing, but a structural condition. Coastal towns eroding into the sea or abandoned by seasonal economies. Former industrial communities still reeling from closures decades past. Rural villages where services have retreated beyond reach. Urban wards where transience prevents community from forming. The Office for National Statistics tells us that loneliness affects every demographic, every region, every class, but it does not affect them equally. The places I have described share common features. They are distant from centers of power. They have experienced economic shocks from which recovery was never supported. They house populations who cannot easily leave. They have been measured, studied, and documented, then left largely to manage alone. What changes this is not sympathy, but attention. These places exist whether comfortable Britain acknowledges them or not. The residents are not statistics. They are people who remember different times. People managing difficult circumstances with whatever resources they have. People who did not choose isolation, but had it chosen for them. Community organisations fight this every day. Age UK befriending services. Community transport schemes run by volunteers. Men's sheds where retired workers find purpose and company. Churches that serve as social centres long after their congregations have thinned. These efforts deserve recognition. They do not receive sufficient support. If you live in one of these places, or somewhere like them, I want to hear from you. Comments from residents carry weight that no archive can match. Tell me what I captured accurately. Tell me what I missed. Tell me about the communities in your area that deserve attention. If you know someone who is lonely, reach out. A phone call, a visit, an invitation. The solutions to loneliness are ultimately human, even when the causes are structural. Please watch the video appearing on your screen next.